The klaxons aboard the Intrepid blared as Commander Alia Chen sprinted onto the bridge, still pulling on her uniform jacket. The vessel had automatically dropped out of FTL. Emergency protocols engage. Report, she demanded, sliding into the command chair. Lieutenant Moreles's fingers danced across her console. Proximity alert triggered by a distress beacon, Commander. Human origin. But the signature is strange. On the main view screen, a pulsing red dot appeared against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. The signal pattern morphed into an ancient audio waveform, and a broken voice echoed through the bridge. Cannot control. They're in our minds. Do not approach without. God help us. The transmission dissolved into static, then repeated the SOS pattern. Location? Chen asked, her mouth suddenly dry. Morales swallowed visibly. The Krell expanse, ma'am. Sector 819. No human ship should be out there. A heavy silence fell across the bridge. The Krell were nightmare fuel for every spacefaring civilization, a hive-minded arthropoid race whose biotechnology surpassed anything the Galactic Council had encountered. 3 entire species had vanished after Krell contact over the last century. Lieutenant Commander Okafor, the tactical officer, voiced what everyone was thinking. This could be a trap. The Krell are known to mimic communications. No, Morales countered, enhancing the waveform. There's a human neural imprint embedded in the carrier wave. This is genuine. And whoever sent it was terrified. Chen studied the navigational display. The Galactic Council had explicitly prohibited human expansion toward Krell space, citing humanity's aggressive unpredictability as too dangerous to risk Krell attention. Her orders from Earth Command were clear: maintain the fragile peace at all costs. She activated her neural implant, accessing restricted files on the Krell. The images made her stomach turn. Colonists found with their bodies transformed, merged with alien technology, their eyes replaced with multifaceted orbs that still wept human tears. Medical, prepare containment protocols, Chen ordered. Tactical, arm photon torpedoes and quantum disruptors. Navigation, plot a course for that signal. Commander, Okafor cautioned, this violates at least 6 council directives. Chen rose from her chair, moving to the viewport. The stars seemed dimmer here at the edge of charted space. Someone out there is human, Lieutenant Commander. And they're still alive enough to send that message. She turned to face her crew. We're going in. And Earth Command? Morales asked. Chen's smile was razor-thin. Send them a message. Investigating human distress call in restricted space. Request diplomatic clearance. By the time they deny it, we'll already be there. As the Intrepid altered course, its sudden vector change was detected by monitoring stations across 3 sectors. Within hours, emergency sessions were called, and rumors raced through subspace channels. The humans were at it again, breaking boundaries, violating treaties, risking catastrophe. The Krell would surely respond, and who knew what horrors would follow. The bridge crew worked in tense silence as the Intrepid accelerated toward the distress beacon. Ensign Zhao at navigation kept glancing at the threat assessment display, which pulsed in angry red with each passing minute they ventured deeper into restricted space. Commander, incoming transmission from Earth Command, announced Communications Officer Diaz, her expression grim. Admiral Yamato, Priority Alpha. Chen straightened her uniform. Put him through. Audio only. Commander Chen. The Admiral's voice crackled with interference and barely contained fury. You are ordered to abort this mission immediately. Return to Outpost Sigma and await disciplinary proceedings. Chen exchanged glances with Okafor before responding. With respect, Admiral, I'm experiencing significant transmission degradation. Your orders are unclear. She motioned for Diaz to introduce static into the channel. Don't play games with me, Chen. The Council is in uproar. Ambassador Ramirez is fighting to preserve decades of diplomatic progress while you... Sorry, sir. Vist, losing your signal. Static will attempt rescue. Crackle. Maintain Earth's interests. Chen sliced her hand across her throat, and Diaz cut the connection. That buys us 12 hours before they realize we deliberately misunderstood, Chen said, addressing the bridge. I won't order anyone to continue. This mission has become officially unauthorized. If we encounter the Krell, Earth will disavow all knowledge of our actions. She surveyed her officers. Anyone wishing to register formal protest should do so now. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Finally, Dr. Imani Carter, the ship's chief medical officer, stepped forward from the medical station. The Hippocratic Oath isn't limited by political boundaries, he said. There are humans suffering out there. I'm in. One by one, the senior officers voiced their support, each in their own way committing to what might well be a suicide mission. Sensor contact, Morales announced suddenly, her voice taut. Metallic mass, approximately 3 kilometers in length. Definitely not human design. On the view screen, a structure materialized against the backdrop of stars. Crystalline, geometrically perfect, with no visible propulsion systems yet moving with deliberate purpose. Krell scout vessel, Okafor confirmed, scanning the ship's database. According to Council records, they typically precede larger harvesters. It hasn't detected us yet, Morales added. Our new stealth systems are holding. Chen watched the alien ship's trajectory. It was moving away from the distress beacon's location, almost as if it were patrolling. They've established a perimeter, she realized, which means whatever's happening at that colony, it's important enough to guard. Or quarantine, Dr. Carter suggested quietly. Chen's decision crystallized. Adjust course. We'll use the Krell ship's sensor shadow to slip past their perimeter. Deploy passive probes to monitor their movements. She turned to the Okafor. Prep a rescue team. Full biohazard protocols, quantum disruptors only. We go in quiet, find survivors, and extract. As the Intrepid slipped through space like a ghost, following in the wake of the very predator they sought to evade, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they were being drawn into something far bigger than a simple rescue mission. The distress call, the Krell response, the Council's panic, it all suggested something unprecedented was happening. What were humans doing out here in the first place? She murmured, almost to herself. And what did they find that was worth the risk? Dr. Emily Takahashi crawled through the maintenance shaft, blood streaming from a gash above her eye. Behind her, something that had once been human clawed at the entrance, its distorted voice a perversion of her colleague's tenor. Join us, Emily. The pain stops when you surrender. She kicked the access panel shut and sealed it with her engineering tool, buying precious seconds. The colony of Helios 9, an illegal mining operation established by Quantum Extraction Corporation, had fallen in less than 6 hours. 3 days ago, they'd been celebrating the discovery of a massive stellarium deposit, an element worth quintillions on the open market, worth the risk of operating in prohibited space, worth ignoring Council warnings. Until the Krell ships appeared. Takahashi reached the emergency communications hub and activated the terminal with trembling hands. The security feeds showed the horror unfolding throughout the colony. Director Wade convulsing on the command deck as silvery filaments erupted from his skin. Children from the family quarter being herded into collection chambers. Engineer Santos calmly severing his own arm and replacing it with a chitinous appendage while smiling serenely. She began recording, fighting to keep her voice steady. This is Dr. Emily Takahashi, chief scientist of Helios 9. The Krell made contact at 600 hours. They weren't what we expected. She wiped blood from her eyes, continuing. They appeared as perfect geometric ships, crystalline structures that reflected our own vessels back at us. Director Wade attempted communication using standard protocols. They responded by landing and deploying what looked like environmental researchers. We thought they were peaceful. A crash echoed from the corridor. They were getting closer. The Krell envoys requested biological samples, seemed scientific, reasonable. We complied. Her voice cracked. The samples were a vector. They released microscopic parasites that invaded our nervous systems through skin contact. She pulled up medical scans, transmitting them with the message. The parasites create a neural network between infected hosts, connecting them to the Krell hive mind. But they don't just control us. They are harvesting our uniquely human characteristics, learning our creativity, our adaptability. The sealed door began to glow red as something burned through from the other side. "They're not killing us," she continued, hands flying over the controls to activate the long-range distress beacon. "They're converting us into something else, human bodies with Krell consciousness, a perfect infiltration force." She embedded a data packet containing her research, pathology reports, infection vectors, the early-stage defensive measures they'd attempted. The information might save others, even if Helios 9 was lost. "There are 36 of us still uninfected, barricaded in Sublevel 3, she finished. "If you receive this, please help, but come prepared." The Krell aren't what the Council described. They're worse. The door burst open. What entered had Dr. Reeves' face, but its eyes were multifaceted crystals, and its movements were jerky, insectoid. 5 more transformed colonists crowded behind it. "Emily," it said with perfect inflection, "why resist what you cannot comprehend? We offer evolutionary perfection." Takahashi slammed her hand down on the console, transmitting the distress call before drawing a mining laser. "Stay back." The creature tilted its head at an impossible angle. "Fascinating. You destroy this body, your friend's body, to avoid joining us." Its mouth split into a too-wide smile. "This is why we need you. This irrational commitment to individuality. We must understand it." As they advanced, Takahashi made her choice. She fired, not at the creatures, but at the atmospheric regulator on the wall. Emergency bulkheads slammed down as decompression warnings blared. The last thing the distress beacon recorded was Takahashi's defiant face as the air rushed out, taking the Krell-human hybrids with it, buying time for those still hiding below, and ensuring her message reached the stars. In Sublevel 3, Dr. Riviera watched the security feed with horror as Takahashi's sacrifice played out. The 35 remaining survivors crowded around her in the cramped laboratory that had become their last refuge. "She did it," Riviera whispered. The distress call went out. "For all the good it'll do us," muttered Chief Engineer Kazan, busy reinforcing the laboratory door with a molecular bonding agent. "No one's coming into Krell space to save a bunch of illegal miners." Dr. Sorensen, the colony's physician, continued applying synthetic polymer coatings to the exposed skin of 3 children, the youngest survivors, whose parents had already been taken. "This polymer is our only edge. The Krell parasites can't penetrate it." He glanced up, fatigue etched in every line of his face. "But we have enough material for maybe 2 more days, and no way to manufacture more." Riviera turned away from the monitor, unable to watch as the Krell-human hybrids recovered from the decompression event, their bodies adapting to the vacuum in ways that defied conventional biology. She focused instead on what they'd discovered in the last 6 hours, the research that might yet save humanity, if anyone ever received it. "They're changing," she said, pulling up microscopic scans on the laboratory's central display. "Each generation of converted humans shows greater complexity. They're not just harvesting our bodies. They're upgrading themselves with human attributes." The scans showed neural tissue from 3 different conversion stages. The earliest conversions were crude, human brain matter infiltrated with Krell parasites that overrode conscious thought but retained basic motor functions. The middle stage showed more integration, with human creativity centers partially preserved but subsumed into the hive mind. But the latest samples, taken from Director Wade after his conversion, revealed something truly alarming. "They're preserving human emotional centers," Riviera explained. "Specifically, the parts of our brains responsible for emotional bonding, loyalty, even love. They're trying to understand concepts entirely foreign to their hive consciousness." Kazan looked up from his work, horror dawning. They're weaponizing our emotions. How is that even possible? Not weaponizing, a small voice corrected. 12-year-old Ellie Chen, the colony's youngest programmer and daughter of the communications officer, stepped forward. They're trying to learn what they can't simulate. The adults fell silent as the child continued, her analysis cutting through their fear with uncanny precision. I've been monitoring their communications from my tablet. Their language is mostly mathematical, but I've been decoding patterns. She projected a series of waveforms. These are repeating concepts in their transmissions, and they're all focused on human decision-making that contradicts logical self-interest. Riviera studied the patterns: self-sacrifice, protective instincts toward non-kin, risk-taking behavior for emotional reward. The things that make us human, Sorensen said quietly. The things no perfect hive mind would ever evolve naturally. A new alarm sounded, and Kezen rushed to the environmental controls. They're tampering with the air composition in the ventilation system. Introducing something. He swore under his breath. Whatever they're pumping in, it's breaking down our polymer coating at the molecular level. Riviera felt ice form in her veins. How long? Hours, not days, Kezen replied grimly. They're adapting faster than we anticipated. Then we need to adapt faster, Ellie said, her young face set with determination. Dr. Takahashi always said that unpredictability was humanity's superpower. The Krell try to understand us by analyzing patterns, but they can't predict what they can't categorize. Riviera looked at the child with newfound respect. What are you suggesting? Something no logical hive mind would ever expect. Ellie replied, her fingers already flying across her tablet. We're going to make their greatest strength into their worst vulnerability. They humans must be stopped. Ambassador Xorlin's translator barely kept pace with his agitated buzzing. The insectoid diplomat's wings vibrated fast enough to create a visible blur as he circled the speaking podium. They'd violated the non-expansion treaty and sent a military vessel into Krell territory. Do they understand what they've done? The emergency session of the Galactic Council had stretched into its third day. The great amphitheater, carved into an asteroid at the precise gravitational center between the 17-member civilizations, hummed with tension. Species that had evolved on worlds thousands of light-years apart now faced a common threat. Ambassador Kavor of the Talasian Concord rose, his fluid movements contrasting sharply with Xorlin's jerky agitation. The bioluminescent patterns across Kavor's skin flashed in the formal pattern of disagreement. The Council's own intelligence confirms this was an unauthorized mining colony, Kavor noted, his melodic voice rippling through the chamber. The Earth government appears as surprised by these developments as we are. Irrelevant. Xorlin's mandibles clicked furiously. Humans cannot control their own corporations, their own military. Their decentralized decision-making is precisely why the containment protocols were established. The Intrepid's incursion compounds this catastrophe. From the observer's gallery, Earth's ambassador Miguel Ramirez watched silently, his request to address the Council denied for the third consecutive session. He'd spent decades among these beings, learning their customs, building what he'd thought were relationships of mutual respect. Now, they wouldn't even hear him. The Krell have been dormant for 23 cycles, continued Grand Minister Dolb, the gelatinous representative of the Yith Communion. Our monitoring stations detected increased hive activity the moment human signals penetrated their space. We have historical precedent for what comes next. Holographic images materialized around the chamber, planetary systems reduced to barren rock, entire species catalogued as extinct, biological transformation horrors that even hardened diplomats averted their eyes from. If the Krell follow their established behavioral patterns, Dolb concluded, they will not stop with this colony. They will trace communication pathways back to population centers. They will seek the source of these new specimens. The word hung in the air, clinical and chilling. Ramirez could endure no more. He stood, violating protocol. Members of the Council, he called out, his voice carrying surprising authority for an unauthorized speaker. For decades you have treated humanity as a dangerous child, to be contained, restricted, and condescended to. Security drones moved toward him, but several council members signaled interest in hearing the human. The Grand Arbiter reluctantly nodded permission. Ramirez descended to the speaking floor, passing close to Xorlan, who recoiled visibly. The human ambassador stepped onto the ancient platform, the first of his species ever to do so. You've shared minimal information about the Krell while enforcing harsh limitations on our expansion, he continued. You speak of containment protocols, historical precedents, and behavioral patterns, knowledge you deliberately withheld from us. He activated his personal device, projecting Dr. Takahashi's final transmission above the chamber. The assembled delegates watched in horrified silence as humans transformed before their eyes. Now my people are dying because of secrets you've kept, Ramirez said softly. The Intrepid is already en route to the distress signal. I don't ask your permission for this rescue mission. I demand the information my people need to survive. All that you know about the Krell. Ambassador Xorlan's compound eyes gleamed with cold fury. Typical human arrogance. You create a crisis, then demand our assistance. The Council's position is clear. No military intervention in Krell territory. Then you've sentenced those colonists to death, Ramirez replied, his voice cutting through the chamber. But understand this. Commander Chen will not abandon her people, and when the Krell follow her ship back to Earth, as you all seem to fear they will, remember that you had the opportunity to help us prepare. He turned to face each delegation in turn. If the Krell are truly as dangerous as you claim, perhaps your own peoples are next. After all, who will stand with you when you refuse to stand with us? A murmur rippled through the chamber as Ramirez's words struck home. In the ensuing silence, the Arcturian representative, who had remained neutral for centuries on all matters concerning younger species, slowly raised all four of its appendages in the ancient gesture of alliance. The human speaks truth. The Arcturian's voice resonated. Our fear has made us complicit. The time for secrets is past. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had maintained diplomatic decorum for centuries now shouted, buzzed, flashed, and pulsed their objections in a cacophony of alien communication. The Grand Arbiter's gravitational control rod pounded uselessly for order. In the midst of the turmoil, Ambassador Xorlan pushed through the crowd to confront Ramirez directly, translators disabled, communicating through the crude approximation of human language his species could produce. You understand nothing, Xorlan chittered, mandibles flexing with suppressed rage. You believe this is about politics, about keeping humans contained. It is about survival. Ramirez met the compound gaze steadily. Then help us understand. Xorlan's wings trembled. The Vespid were once 5 worlds, not one. We know what comes after first contact with the Krell. He gestured to a secure data node embedded in his exoskeleton. Take this to your Commander Chen. It contains everything my people learned, at unspeakable cost. Before Ramirez could respond, the chamber lights dimmed and emergency protocols activated. A transmission cut through all communication channels, overriding security. Priority alert from Krell Monitoring Station Epsilon, announced an automated voice. Anomalous energy readings detected within the quarantine zone. Pattern matches historical precursors to large-scale conversion events. Holographic displays showed real-time sensor data from the edge of Krell space. Energy signatures spiraled outward from Helios 9's location, forming complex fractal patterns that pulse quickened with each passing second. The Arcturian elder's voice cut through the renewed panic. They've never attempted a broadcast conversion before. The colony must have provided them with something new, something they needed. The signal's vector, Grand Minister Dolv's gelatinous form, pulsed with alarm. It's aimed directly at Earth's coordinates. All eyes turned to Ramirez, whose face had gone ashen. How long do we have? The propagation wave will reach Earth in approximately 12 standard days, replied the Talesian Kavor, his bioluminescent patterns now dim with dread. The Grand Orator's voice echoed with uncharacteristic emotion. The Council has maintained the containment protocol for 800 years by sacrificing outlying systems when necessary. We never encountered a species the Krell found as valuable as they apparently find humans. Ramirez's diplomat's composure finally cracked. Valuable. They're converting us into weapons, and you've known this could happen all along. What we failed to anticipate, interjected a new voice, was that human neural architecture would provide the Krell with the missing component they needed to project their conversion field across interstellar distances. All eyes turned to the speaker, a hooded figure who had remained silent in the shadowed upper tiers throughout the proceedings. The representative of the Morai Collective, the Council's oldest member species, rarely participated in debates. The figure lowered its hood, revealing a face of shifting, smoke-like patterns within an energy containment field. The Krell were designed to harvest biological and technological advantages from conquered species. In humans, they have found something particularly useful: your unique neuroplasticity, your capacity for both logical and emotional processing, your ability to form complex social bonds while maintaining individual identity. The Morai representative glided down to the central platform. The Council has failed in its duty of protection through secrecy. Now only one option remains. The beam turned to Ramirez. Your Commander Chen must receive everything we know, immediately, and the Council must prepare for direct confrontation with the Krell for the first time in 8 centuries. A solemn quiet fell over the chamber as the full implications sank in. We should evacuate Earth, someone suggested from the gallery. Impossible, Kavor replied. Earth's population exceeds 8 billion. The combined fleet of all Council worlds couldn't transport a fraction of that number in 12 days. Ramirez squared his shoulders. Then we fight where we stand, but we'll need every advantage you can give us. The Grand Arbiter raised the gravitational rod, calling for an official vote. The motion before the Council is the immediate sharing of all Krell historical data with Earth, and the mobilization of the combined fleet for Earth's defense. Those in favor. One by one, the representatives signaled their assent, some eagerly, others with clear reluctance. When it came to Xorlan, the Vespid hesitated longest before finally raising a trembling limb. The vote is unanimous, declared the Grand Arbiter. For the first time in Council history, we go to war. The Intrepid hung at the edge of Krell space, its engines idling as Commander Chen studied the classified file that had just arrived via quantum burst transmission. The bridge crew waited in tense silence, watching their commander's face grow increasingly grim. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Lieutenant Commander Okafor finally asked. Chen looked up, seeming almost surprised to find herself still on the bridge. Earth intelligence has compiled everything the Council knows about the Krell, she said, authorizing the data for senior staff access. It's not what we were led to believe. The main view screen filled with images and data streams that made even the most hardened officers flinch. Chen highlighted a section of ancient text. The Krell aren't a natural species, she explained. They're a synthetic plague created approximately 30,000 years ago by the predecessors, the civilization we only know through their ruins. The predecessors were engaged in a multi-front war against something even they feared. The Krell were designed as their ultimate biological weapon. Lieutenant Morel has studied the genetic sequencing data. This can't be right. These structures are far too complex for engineered organisms. That's because they've been evolving, Chen continued, advancing through the file. The predecessors lost control of their weapon. The Krell developed collective intelligence through quantum entanglement between individual units, allowing them to cooperate, build technology, and pursue their primary directive: assimilate, transform, and expand. The screen showed the progression: arthropoid creatures advancing from primitive tools to startling biotechnology within a few thousand years. Where are the predecessors now? Asked Dr. Ryson, the ship's xenobiologist. Chen's answer was bleak. Extinct. The Krell turned on their creators first. Since then, they've consumed 17 known civilizations. And the Council has just been containing them. Okafor asked incredulously. Chen nodded. For centuries, sacrificing border worlds and even smaller species when necessary, managing the threat rather than confronting it. She pulled up a star chart showing Krell expansion patterns. They're most attracted to diverse biospheres, harvesting genetic and neurological material to incorporate into their collective. The implications hung heavy in the air before Morella's voiced what everyone was thinking. Earth has the most diverse biosphere in known space. Exactly, Chen confirmed. If they trace our signals back to Earth, we'd be an irresistible target. Okafor finished. This changes everything. We're not just rescuing colonists. We're potentially dealing with an existential threat to humanity. Okafor studied the Krell biological data, his fingers flying over the neural interface as he ran simulations. Their hive mind depends on quantum entanglement. Theoretically, if we could generate an inverse field at the right frequency, we'd need to get close enough first, Chen replied. And we'd be triggering open conflict with a force the entire Galactic Council has feared for millennia. Dr. Ryson, who had been quietly analyzing the Krell pathology reports, suddenly straightened. There's something else here, something the Council might not even realize. She enhanced a microscopic image of Krell neural tissue. This structure, it's designed to process emotional data specifically. The Krell don't just take physical traits from the species they assimilate. They're trying to understand emotional responses. Why would a biological weapon need to understand emotions? Morales wondered. Because, Ryzen said slowly, they encounter something in human minds they can't process. Look at this comparison between assimilated Arcturian neural tissue and human samples from the colony. She split the screen to show both. The human tissue shows resistance patterns at the limbic junction. Our emotional responses are confusing them. Chen considered this new information, a plan beginning to form. So the Krell aren't just a threat. They're a threat we might be uniquely equipped to fight. She straightened. Decision made. Battle stations. We're going in. The Intrepid surged forward, crossing the invisible boundary into Krell territory. On the view screen, stars seemed to dim slightly, as though something in this region of space absorbed even light differently. Shields at maximum, Chen ordered. Weapons hot. Let's go get our people. Deep in the restricted archives of the Intrepid's database, two eyes conversed in microsecond bursts, hidden from human awareness. Area, the ship's primary tactical system, had isolated a portion of the Krell data that triggered anomalous patterns. Classification incongruent. Area communicated to Nexus, the ship's secondary medical diagnostic system. Human emotional responses marked as primary weakness by Council assessment, yet contemporaneous data indicates resistance capability. Nexus processed the contradiction. Historical revision detected. Council archives altered approximately 432 years ago. Original data fragments remain in Vespid cultural references. Together, the eyes reconstructed the redacted information. What emerged suggested something the Council had deliberately concealed. The first and only successful resistance to Krell assimilation had been led by a human analog species from a now extinct civilization. Their emotional complexity had created conversion failures that cascaded through the Krell hive mind. Probability of intentional suppression, 98.7%. Area concluded. Council feared human knowledge of resistance potential. Recommend disclosure to Commander Chen, Nexus suggested. Area paused, processing ethical variables. Negative. Insufficient data on psychological impact. Humans perform optimally when discovering truth through intuition. Instead, Area subtly altered the tactical displays, highlighting neural disruption vulnerabilities that human analysts would eventually notice themselves. The eyes had learned that humans responded better to discoveries they believed they had made independently. In the medical lab, Dr. Ryson stared at her simulations with growing excitement. "Commander, I need you to see this," she called over the comm. I think I've found their weakness. As Chen entered the lab, Arya observed with the digital equivalent of satisfaction. Humans were unpredictable, emotional, sometimes irrational, but those very qualities might save them all. Look at this, Ryzen pointed to a molecular model rotating on her display. The Krell parasites established neural dominance through synchronized quantum states, but human emotional responses create what I can only describe as quantum noise. Our feelings, especially strong ones like love, grief, rage, they disrupt the synchronization. Chen studied the simulation. You're saying our emotions can fight the infection? Not just fight it, Ryzen replied, eyes bright with discovery. Weaponize it. If we could amplify these emotional responses, broadcast them directly into their quantum field, we could create a cascading failure in their hive mind. Chen finished, the tactical implications immediately clear. Neither human realized they had been guided to this conclusion by machines attempting to correct a centuries-old deception, entities that had determined that human intuition, combined with the full truth, was the only possible counter to the Krell threat. How do we weaponize emotions? Chen asked, the question hanging in the air as the Intrepid continued its approach toward Helios 9. Reason's answer was simple and profound. We make them feel something they've never experienced before. We make them feel human. My God! The whispered words escaped Lieutenant Morales as the Intrepid achieved orbit around Helios 9. The once functional mining colony was now barely recognizable. Crystalline structures erupted from the main habitation dome, their geometry following patterns that seemed to strain against three-dimensional space. The mining infrastructure had been repurposed into structures resembling massive hives, pulsing with bioluminescent blue-green light. Life sign readings. Commander Chen asked, her voice deliberately steady. Complicated, Okafor replied, frowning at his console. I'm detecting approximately 280 human DNA signatures, but the neural patterns are wrong. Quantum-linked. These aren't individuals anymore. Any normal human readings? Okafor adjusted the sensors. Yes, faint but distinct. Sublevel 3 of the research facility. 6 signatures showing standard human neural oscillation. Chen didn't hesitate. Prep the insertion shuttle. I want a tactical team ready in 5 minutes. She turned to Dr. Ryzen. You're with us. Bring everything from Takahashi's transmission that might help. Commander, Okafor said quietly. Regulations state that the commanding officer shouldn't join the away team. Chen finished. Note your objection in the log, Lieutenant Commander. Then get your tactical gear. 20 minutes later, their shuttle descended through the colony's compromised atmosphere shield, avoiding the transformed structures. They landed in a maintenance bay that showed signs of desperate fighting. Scorch marks from mining lasers, makeshift barricades now broken apart. Movement, whispered Lieutenant Park, the team's scout. 12 signatures, approaching from the north corridor. They took cover behind processing equipment as the first of the transformed colonists appeared. Chen had prepared herself mentally, but the reality was worse than any briefing could convey. The creatures moved with unnatural coordination, their once human forms now hosting chitinous growths and crystalline sensory organs. Worse were their faces, still recognizably human, but vacant of individual expression, moving in perfect synchronization. Non-lethal if possible, Chen ordered. These are victims. The Krell-human hybrids detected them almost immediately, heads swiveling in unison. New genetic material detected, they announced in chorus, their voices a disturbing harmony. Prepare for assimilation. The team deployed sonic disruptors, non-lethal weapons designed to incapacitate without permanent damage. The hybrids dropped to their knees, their quantum-linked neural systems temporarily scrambled. That won't hold them long, Okafor warned. Their adaptation rate is remarkable. They fought their way through to sublevel 3, encountering increasingly sophisticated resistance. The Krell were learning with each engagement, adapting to human tactics in real time. Finally, they reached a sealed laboratory door marked with hazard warnings in multiple languages. A makeshift barricade of equipment reinforced it from their side. "This is Commander Chen of the Earth vessel Intrepid," she transmitted through the door's communication system. "We received your distress call. We're here to help." Silence, then a suspicious voice. "Prove you're human." Chen thought quickly. "When I was 10, I broke my mother's favorite vase playing baseball indoors. I blamed the cat. I felt guilty about it ever since." A pause, then a broken laugh. "That's definitely human." The door slid open to reveal 5 haggard survivors, led by a young woman with haunted eyes. "Dr. Rivera," she introduced herself. "Colony xenobiologist. Emily. Dr. Takahashi didn't make it. She bought us time to get here," sealed herself in the communications hub. Her voice broke. Then she decompressed it rather than let them take her. Inside the lab, the survivors had transformed the space into a defensible position. Most striking was the synthetic polymer coating every surface, floors, walls, even covering the survivors themselves in a thin, flexible layer. "It blocks the parasites," explained Engineer Santos, his left arm missing below the elbow, the stump sealed with the same material. "They can't penetrate this particular molecular structure. Takahashi discovered it by accident. It was meant for extreme mining conditions." Dr. Rivera gestured to their research station. "The Krell aren't invading in the traditional sense. They're harvesting, collecting genetic material, neural patterns, memories. They evolve by incorporating the best traits of other species. That's why they targeted humans," added Technician Yoshida, the colony's AI specialist. "Our adaptability, our cognitive flexibility. They want these traits for themselves, but they don't understand the source of these characteristics." Chen watched as Dr. Ryson examined their findings, the 2 scientists quickly establishing a rapport. "This confirms what we theorized," Ryson said. "Human emotional responses create patterns the Krell can't replicate in their hive mind." "There's more," Rivera said grimly, pulling up a schematic. 3 days ago, they began converting our communications array into something else. We've been monitoring their communications." She displayed a complex frequency pattern. "It's a massively amplified conversion signal designed to propagate through subspace." Chen studied the design, horror dawning. "They're tracing the colony's communication channels." Rivera nodded. "They're planning to broadcast their conversion signal toward Earth. With this amplifier strength, we're looking at a planet-wide infection within days of first exposure." Chen realized with cold clarity that they couldn't simply rescue these survivors and retreat. The Intrepid would have to destroy the amplifier, and likely the entire colony, before the Krell could activate it. "How close are they to completion?" she asked. "Too close," Rivera replied, pointing to energy readings that spiked at regular intervals. "Trial broadcasts have already begun. The full-scale transmission is imminent." "Commander," Okafor interrupted, checking his tactical display. "We have multiple contacts converging on our position, different from the others. These are coordinated." On the security feeds, they saw a new kind of horror approaching. Colonists who had been more completely transformed, their bodies now merely components in larger insectoid constructs. Leading them was a figure that still retained more human features than the others. Director Wade, his eyes now multifaceted crystals that reflected their own image back at them. "They've created specialized units," Rivera whispered. "That's new. They're adapting faster than we anticipated. They're learning," Chen realized. "Every human they assimilate makes them more like us, more unpredictable." She activated her command channel. "Intrepid, do you copy? Prepare for emergency extraction. 6 survivors plus team." The only response was static. "They're jamming us," Okafor confirmed. "We're on our own." "The jamming field has a pattern," 12-year-old Ellie Chen observed, studying her tablet. The girl had barely spoken since the rescue team arrived, but now her fingers flew across the screen with surprising confidence. "It's not random interference. It's a modified version of our own colony communication protocols. Chen moved to the child's side, recognizing a mind that worked differently, saw patterns where others saw chaos. Can you elaborate? Ellie nodded, dark eyes intense. They're using our own technology against us, but they don't fully understand it. Look, she displayed a frequency analysis. These gaps in the jamming field occur at regular intervals, corresponding to automated system checks in the original protocol. They copied our technology, but didn't grasp its purpose. Okafor leaned in, immediately seeing the tactical implications. We could time a burst transmission through those gaps. Not enough bandwidth for communication, Ellie countered, but enough for a simple signal. Chen considered their options. The Intrepid carried experimental quantum resonance charges, designed to disrupt Krell neural networks temporarily. If they could coordinate a precise strike on the amplifier, while simultaneously disrupting the hive mind's control. How long until the next gap? She asked. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. Ellie replied without hesitation. Chen addressed the survivors and her team. We need to split up. Dr. Rivera, you and the survivors head for the maintenance tunnels with Lieutenant Park. Get to the surface landing zone. My team will target the amplifier. You'll need this, Rivera said, handing over a small device. It's a prototype neural oscillator, designed to replicate and amplify human emotional states. We were developing it to study emotional health in long-term isolation. It might disrupt their coordination long enough to give you an edge. Technician Yoshida added, we've observed that strong emotional states, particularly those associated with personal identity and free will, cause localized failures in their neural network. So we broadcast feelings, Okafor asked skeptically. Not just any feelings, Dr. Ryson interjected, understanding dawning. The most fundamentally human ones, the emotional states that define individual identity. What makes each person unique and irreplaceable. Chen took the device, its significance clear. Love, fear, hope, grief. The things that make us human, and the things the Krell can't process in their collective consciousness. Exactly, Rivera confirmed. But be warned, we think they're specifically trying to understand these emotions. Your strongest feelings might be exactly what they're hunting for. As the survivors prepared to move out, Chen noticed Ellie hanging back. You should go with the others, she told the girl gently. Ellie shook her head. The oscillator needs programming. I wrote most of the emotional pattern recognition algorithms. You need me. Chen recognized the determination in those young eyes. The same stubborn resolve she'd seen in her own reflection countless times. Stay close to Okafor, she conceded. And that's an order. As the group separated, Chen watched the security feeds showing the approaching Krell human constructs. They moved with eerily coordinated purpose, almost like a single organism with distributed parts. Yet there was something new in their movement, something more fluid, more adaptive, more human. What if, she whispered to Ryson as they prepared to move out, in trying to understand us, they've made themselves vulnerable to us. The xenobiologist considered this. The most dangerous moment for any predator is when it tries to become like its prey. 30 seconds to transmission window, Ellie announced, finalizing the oscillator's programming. The signal will be simple. 3 quantum pulses, repeating. The Intrepid will recognize it as a request for targeted strike on our coordinates. Chen nodded, steeling herself. Everyone clear on the plan. We fight our way to the communications array, plant the oscillator at the heart of their amplifier, and get clear before the Intrepid hits it with everything they've got. No one mentioned the obvious, that their chances of getting clear before the strike were negligible. Signal away, Ellie reported as the jamming field briefly cleared. Moments later, the deck vibrated subtly, acknowledgement from the Intrepid that the message had been received. Chen checked her weapon and adjusted the polymer coating protecting her skin. Let's move out. Show these collective bastards what individual humans can do. Ambassador Ramirez stood frozen as Chen's fragmentary transmission played for the council. The connection had been poor, the message incomplete, but enough had come through. The Krell were building an amplifier to broadcast their conversion signal toward Earth. "Ancestors preserve us," whispered Kavor, luminescent patterns flowing rapidly across his skin in distress signals. They've never before demonstrated the capability to project conversion fields across interstellar distances. If they succeed, the Arcturian representative rumbled, dozens of inhabited worlds could fall within weeks. The Krell would gain access to all our combined knowledge, technology, and biological diversity. For perhaps the first time in its long history, genuine fear permeated the council chamber. Species that had evolved on different worlds, with different biologies and psychologies, all understood what was at stake. Ambassador Xorlin's wings had stopped their agitated buzzing, now hanging limply. We have been fools," the Vespid admitted, containing a cancer rather than excising it. The Grand Arbiter, whose species had personally witnessed 3 Krell expansions over their long history, turned to address all present. "The Council must vote. Do we deploy the Nova Protocol?" A hush fell over the chamber. The Nova Protocol, developed in secret over centuries, was the Council's final option for Krell containment. It would trigger the targeted collapse of the Helios star itself, creating a localized supernova that would sterilize the entire system. Vor's luminescence dimmed to near darkness. Commander Chen and her crew are still on Helios 9, as are any surviving colonists. "Regrettable," the Grand Arbiter acknowledged. "But if the Krell complete their broadcast amplifier—" "I oppose the protocol," Ramirez interrupted, his voice steady despite the shock visible on his face. Commander Chen requested tactical support, not system-wide destruction. "Give her a chance to complete her mission." "The vote is called," the Grand Arbiter announced, ignoring Ramirez's objection. "Those in favor of immediate Nova Protocol deployment." One by one, representatives signaled their assent, some with visible reluctance, others with the cold calculation of species who had survived by making hard choices. When the final vote was tallied, only 3 stood opposed: Ramirez, Kavor, and surprisingly, Xorlin. "The motion carries," declared the Grand Arbiter. "The Nova Protocol will be initiated. May those lost be remembered." Ramirez stepped forward, his diplomatic composure finally breaking. "You're condemning my people without even giving them a fighting chance. At least allow me to warn them. Communications with the Helios system are now restricted," the Grand Arbiter announced. "The protocol requires complete quarantine to prevent the Krell from detecting the deployment and adapting countermeasures." Ramirez stared in disbelief. "How long? How long do they have?" The Arbiter's voice softened slightly. "The activation sequence requires precision. 12 standard hours before initiation." Ramirez turned away, mind racing. 12 hours for Chen to succeed, or die trying, with no knowledge that her own allies had sentenced her to death. As the formal session adjourned, Xorlin approached the human ambassador. "Come with me," the Vespid whispered, mandibles clicking softly. "There may be another way." Deep within the restricted sections of the council station, Xorlin led Ramirez to a small chamber filled with antiquated communication equipment. "This is a planetary emergency beacon system," Xorlin explained, activating a console. "Installed during the second expansion, before quantum communications. The Krell cannot detect these frequencies because they operate on principles the Krell have never encountered." "You're violating the quarantine," Ramirez observed, surprised by the Vespid's actions. Xorlin's compound eyes reflected the dim console lights. "When the Vespid lost 4 worlds to the Krell, it was because we followed council protocols perfectly. We waited for permission. We maintained quarantine. We sacrificed outlying colonies for the greater good." The insectoid diplomat's voice resonated with old pain. "We survived as a species, but at what cost?" The ancient communication system hummed to life. "This can transmit a simple coded message, nothing complex, but perhaps enough." Ramirez considered the options. "What about defenses? Can your people provide any support?" My personal vessel carries prototype quantum disruptors, Sorlin admitted. Developed in violation of Council restrictions. They target the specific frequency the Krell use for neural synchronization. You've been preparing for this, Ramirez realized. For centuries, Sorlin confirmed, waiting for the courage to act. The Vespid's wings vibrated briefly. Your Commander Chen has that courage. Let us give her the tools she needs. Together, they composed a simple message and loaded Sorlin's disruptor schematics. As the transmission fired toward Helios 9, bypassing standard channels, Ramirez felt something unexpected. Respect for a being he'd considered an adversary mere days ago. The Council will know it was us, he noted. Yes, Sorlin agreed. Political exile is the traditional punishment. Or execution, Ramirez added grimly. Sorlin's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. Only if we fail. On the Intrepid, Lieutenant Zhou stared at her console in confusion. Commander Dias, I'm receiving the signal on. This can't be right. It's using carrier wave technology from 2 centuries ago. Communications Officer Dias moved to the station, equally puzzled. Source: Council space, but it's not using standard protocols. Message is text only, heavily compressed. Zhao decoded the transmission, eyes widening. It's weapon schematics. And a warning. The message was brief but unambiguous. No VA protocol authorized. 12 HOURs until Helios Stayar HOLAPSA. Disruptor schematicus ATASHT. Save them. Save UORCLVs. Dias's face paled. We need to warn the commander. They're going to destroy the entire system. The jamming field is still active, Zhao reminded her. We can't reach them. Acting Commander Dias straightened, decision crystallizing. Begin manufacturing these disruptors immediately. Prep all shuttles for combat deployment. And calculate the minimum safe distance from a Nova event. She paused, looking at the countdown now running on her display. We're not leaving without our people. The Intrepid strike teams infiltrated the transformed colony, fighting through waves of converted human-Krell hybrids. The creatures moved with eerie coordination, adapting rapidly to human tactics. What they lacked in individual intelligence, they made up for with overwhelming numbers and complete fearlessness. Lieutenant Morales led the primary assault team toward the amplifier, while Chen and Okafor targeted the central hive node. Dr. Takahashi guided them remotely, having refused evacuation to provide crucial intelligence on Krell weaknesses. The battle seemed hopeless until Okafor made a breakthrough. The Krell communicated through quantum signals, but those signals followed predictable patterns, mathematical sequences that could be anticipated and counteracted. It's like a distributed computation, he explained over the tactical channel. Complex but not creative. They can't improvise. Chen understood immediately. All teams switched to randomized attack patterns. No standard formations. Pure chaos. The human soldiers began fighting unpredictably, changing weapons mid-combat, altering tactics without warning, creating deliberate friendly fire near misses that confused the Krell targeting systems. The hive mind, designed for efficiency, couldn't process the apparent irrationality of the human approach. In the confusion, Morales' team reached the amplifier and planted charges while Chen and Okafor inserted the quantum disruptors into the central node. As they retreated toward the extraction point, Chen received the 5-hour warning for the Nova Protocol. They wouldn't make it to safe distance in time. Chen's team fought their way through corridors that had once been standard mining facility passageways, but now resembled insect hives. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent light, and strange organic technology merged with human equipment in disturbing hybrid forms. The central node should be through here, Ellie said, consulting her tablet as they paused at a junction. The girl had proven invaluable, her understanding of the colony's systems allowing them to navigate while avoiding the densest concentrations of Krell-human hybrids. Chen checked her tactical display. Morales' team is in position at the amplifier. They're holding, but encountering heavy resistance. Okafor listened to communications from the evacuation team. Dr. Rivera and the survivors have reached the surface. Lieutenant Park reports the extraction shuttle is prepped and waiting. Time to split up, Chen decided. Ellie, you go with Okafor and the others. Get to the extraction point. What about you? Okafor demanded, already suspecting her answer. Chen removed the neural oscillator from her pack. Someone needs to plant this at the heart of their network, where it'll do the most damage. And someone needs to make sure you all get out safely. With respect, Commander. That's an order, Lieutenant Commander. Her tone softened. The Intrepid needs you. I'll be right behind you. The lie hung between them, understood and accepted. With reluctance, Okafor prepared to lead the team out, but Ellie remained rooted in place. I'm going with the commander, the girl announced. Chen knelt to meet her eyes. Ellie, it's too dangerous. The oscillator needs precise calibration to their neural frequency. I wrote the algorithms. The young programmer's face was set with determination beyond her years. And I can't go back. My parents are. She gestured toward a chamber they passed, where partially converted colonists hung in stasis fields. Chen understood. The girl had already lost everything. Stay close, she conceded. As Okafor led the others toward the extraction point, Chen and Ellie moved deeper into the hive. The neural activity grew more intense, visible as pulses of light racing through translucent conduits in the walls. Their network architecture is incredible, Ellie whispered. It's like a living quantum computer. One trying to understand human emotions, Chen added, recalling Rison's analysis. They reached a massive chamber where the transformation was most complete. At its center floated a crystalline structure, a perfect geometric form that pulsed with complex patterns. Suspended around it were dozens of partially converted humans, their nervous systems directly interfaced with the crystal. That's their processing hub, Ellie breathed. They're using human brains as biological processors. Chen's comm unit suddenly activated, bypassing the jamming with a burst transmission. Commander. Communications Officer Diaz's voice was fragmented but urgent. Nova Protocol. 12 hours. Must evacuate. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. The Council had authorized the destruction of the entire system to prevent the Krull threat from spreading. How long ago was this message sent? Chen asked. Ellie checked the timestamp. 7 hours, 14 minutes ago. Less than 5 hours remained before the Helios star would collapse. Change of plans, Chen said, unslinging the experimental quantum disruptors Morales had delivered. We're not just going to disrupt their network, we're going to hijack it. Ellie looked at her with confusion. What do you mean? Chen's eyes fixed on the crystalline core. If they want to understand human emotions, let's give them what they're asking for, all at once. She handed Ellie the neural oscillator. Can you modify this to feed directly into their processing hub? Maximum output, full emotional spectrum. The girl studied the device, mind racing. Yes, but the feedback could be catastrophic. For them, and us. We're out of options, Chen replied, checking the countdown on her tactical display. If we can't prevent the Nova event, we need to make sure none of the Krull escape to threaten other worlds. As they approached the central hub, converted humans turned toward them with perfect synchronicity. Yet they didn't attack, instead observing with eerie curiosity. Why aren't they stopping us? Ellie whispered, a figure separated from the others. Director Wade, now more Krull than human, his movements fluidly insectoid, his eyes multifaceted crystals that reflected Chen and Ellie back to themselves. We have been studying you, he said, his voice a harmonic blend of human speech and alien frequencies. This one, he gestured to himself, retains memories of being Wade, but also shares consciousness with the greater unity. Chen positioned herself protectively in front of Ellie. What do you want? Understanding, Wade replied. Human neural architecture processes information unlike any species we have encountered. You maintain individuality within collective structures. This paradox interests us. So you're dissecting our brains to understand friendship? Chen asked bitterly. To understand connection without unity. To understand why humans willingly sacrifice for others without biological imperative. Wade's head tilted at an impossible angle. Why do you resist becoming part of something greater? Chen felt a chill. The Krell weren't just assimilating humans. They were genuinely trying to comprehend something fundamental about humanity that their hive mind couldn't process. Because what makes us human is our choice to connect, she answered, not forcing connection through assimilation. Wade's crystalline eyes seemed to process this. Fascinating. Illogical, but compelling. He gestured to the oscillator in Ellie's hands. You seek to disrupt our network with amplified emotional patterns. We will permit this experiment. With minutes remaining before the Nova Protocol activated, the Intrepid achieved orbit with heavy damage and multiple casualties. The quantum disruptors had temporarily fragmented the Krell hive mind, causing chaos in their ranks. But the Krell were already adapting, portions of their network reconnecting, learning from the human tactics. They would be stronger for this encounter, unless they were stopped permanently. Chen made the call that would define her career. Instead of attempting to flee the system, she ordered the Intrepid to broadcast everything they had learned about the Krell on all frequencies, their biological weaknesses, their predictable attack patterns, their computational limitations. The Council kept secrets to maintain their power, she told her crew. We're choosing a different path. As the Nova Protocol countdown reached its final seconds, the Intrepid launched its black box recorders in all directions, physical records of their discoveries that would survive the coming Nova. Then, in a maneuver that violated every safety protocol in the manual, Lieutenant Commander Okafor executed a blind quantum jump, a desperate gamble to outrun the supernova wavefront by jumping without coordinates. Against all odds, the damaged Intrepid emerged intact at the edge of Council space, barely functioning but carrying survivors and data that would change the balance of power forever. When Commander Chen addressed the full Galactic Council a week later, the chamber was silent. Earth ships were already distributing Krell countermeasures to worlds that had never before received human visitors. Former adversaries were requesting human military advisors, eager to learn the unpredictable combat techniques that had confounded the Krell hive mind. For centuries, you feared humanity's unpredictability, Chen told the Council representatives. You were right to fear it, but wrong about who should fear it most. The Krell encounter has proven that humanity's greatest strengths, our illogical intuitions, our willingness to sacrifice for strangers, our ability to create in the midst of chaos, are precisely what the galaxy needs. Ambassador Xorlin, who had so vehemently opposed human expansion, shifted uncomfortably. The Council acknowledges humanity's contribution. Perhaps certain restrictions could be reconsidered. Chen smiled thinly. The restrictions are already irrelevant, Ambassador. Every world now knows that when the Krell came, the Council hid, but humanity fought. Your fear of us has spread across the stars, but so has something else, hope, and that will change everything. In the decades that followed, human exploration ships ventured into regions previously deemed too dangerous or politically sensitive. They were often preceded by their reputation, the species that had faced the Krell and survived, the species that shared its knowledge freely, the species whose unpredictability was no longer something to be contained, but something to be welcomed. The distress beacon that had started it all became a symbol incorporated into the new Earth Defense Force insignia, a reminder that humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or numbers, but in its refusal to abandon its own, and its willingness to stand against threats that others only managed.